Hello there, hi, and welcome to Butterfly Effect, a podcast all about interviewing people. I'm your host, Tristan Ettleman. We're back from a short break again. I feel like I'm becoming a cliche of podcasters that apologize for things all the time, but yeah, it's been a while. It's just how it goes. As I've mentioned many times, the show has become kind of a periodic thing rather than a regular thing or even semi-regular. It's just whenever I have the time and whoever I want to talk to has time. So that's that. But yeah, lots been going on. Life and sad things and such. But everything's things are getting okay. Things are getting better with regards to the world. I think hopefully better than maybe like a week ago. I'm a little more optimistic. I think sometimes I can't tell if like things that are happening are actually getting better, or if I just am somehow in a different mindset any given week or day. It's probably the latter. It almost certainly is the latter. But that being said, you kind of have to delude yourself. I don't know why I'm going down such a dark path. You know what? Let me promote something else while you're already listening to this. My friend Austin Clark and I are working on a video game documentary. It'll be a series, but this first episode will be chronicling the earliest years, prehistory as it were, from 1947 or so to 1971. And that's a big gap, and you don't necessarily think about games happening in that time period, but they did. So that is coming eventually. There's been some roadblocks and such. But hopefully once we get past this episode, we can be much more regular about the episodes. But we gotta get a workflow down, and we went pretty quick at first, and then I think life happens when you do anything as a side project like this podcast. It's hard to devote the energy and time and more specifically the money, in a lot of ways. If you were being paid for it, obviously you would devote a lot more time and energy to it. But it's hard when you got to do other stuff to pay the bills. But anyways, that is happening though. We've put out a trailer a while ago. I don't know if it happened before or after I last talked to y'all, but that can be found on YouTube. It's just called Past Play, /play. I know it's confusing, but I'm sure if you just search Past Play, you'll find it. And yeah, it's a fun project, and like a lot of things, it's just another thing that I'm doing. I like to be diverse, do a lot of things. Anyways, I should talk about our guest today, who has nothing to do with video games, as is the case with about 50% of my guests. Today on the show is Pete Gardner, actor. And he's been in some great stuff like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend right now, I think is the thing that everyone is enjoying of his. But I loved him on Eagle Heart, the weird Adult Swim show with Chris Elliott, and he's been working consistently forever, just doing bit parts or guest spots or what have you. And he has a really cool story, I think, about Chicago improv and Chicago improv scene and working with all those people that came out of that, and kind of finding satisfaction in what you do. It's I was randomly thinking about Chris Elliott and watching Eagle Heart, and I thought this guy is so funny. So here we are. I talked to Pete Gardner. Other than that, I guess the other thing that I want to talk about myself some more is that I've been writing these film essays, which are really fun. If you go to Medium, my name is Tristan Ettleman on there. It's super easy, and it's I write a lot about old films. Just wrapped up writing about 1903, which is I just like old stuff, as you can tell, with the video game documentary and the essays. But even on Twitter @EttleTodd is where I keep everything going. So that's the best way to keep up. Anyways, otherwise, let's talk to Pete. I've talked enough about myself. See you on the other side. What's new? I know, crazy ex-girlfriend is the thing right now, and it's a huge show. I would say I would classify it as huge. People love it.
It is amazing. Well, it's interesting that a lot of people watch it, but I think ratings-wise on the CW, I think it doesn't do all that awesome. But as soon as it went to Netflix, we were just in New York recently for the upfronts, and we did this thing called Vulture Fest. Mm-hmm. And when we were there, all kinds of people in the street in New York City were like stopping me and saying hi and how they liked the show and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely reaching people, but I don't know that it's reaching people on the CW.
Sure. Well, that's how it is now. That's just how it goes, I would assume.
Yeah, nobody watches TV like that anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's cool, though, that it can kind of, proliferate out, and because it used to be if a show didn't go on TV, it doesn't go at all. No one sees it ever, maybe years down the line or whatever. But yeah, and CW has like a special deal with Netflix or something too, right? Like they go on pretty quickly after the season wraps, I'm pretty sure. So people can catch it like, not a year removed or whatever, however long sometimes it takes for things to get on Netflix. So.
Yeah, it's almost instantaneous. I mean, it's almost as soon as we were done, like a couple weeks later. The initial first season, it was a little bit slower.
Sure.
And it did take a little while for people. The only problem is nowadays, when people watch TV, they don't watch it at all because they're like, oh, I'm gonna binge it all. I'm gonna binge it all. And you're like, no, watch it on TV so that we can get the
right
stuff.
Right. You got to encourage the initial watch through live, or I guess, because then that's how it stays alive. But there's the reason I knew about the show was that my roommate was binging it as you described, and I'm like, I could hear the musical numbers in the other room. I'm like, what are you watching? And then I started, I'd watch some of it at a time, and then I was like, oh, this is. That's how I discovered it. So that's obviously, that's probably multiplied a million times over with whoever's seeing it. So that's cool.
Exactly.
So yes, I guess we can talk about the origin. Where are you from?
Well, originally I'm from Scarsdale, New York.
Okay.
Home of the Diet and the Murder. You remember the Scarsdale Diet back in the 80s or whatever that was? It was a long time ago, but it was a very big deal.
Uh-huh.
And so I grew up there, and I went to Scarsdale High, and then I went to go. I went to acting school right out of high school. I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Uh-huh. But
being an 18-year-old in acting school, it just was kind of. I thought it was kind of worthless because I hadn't lived. I hadn't had any experiences aside from living in Scarsdale, New York, which is a very sheltered community.
Uh-huh.
So I would realize I was like, I've got to get out and live. I got to get out and do stuff. And so from there, I went to where did I go? Then I went to Skidmore College. I went to go visit a friend of mine for a weekend. And he was going to Skidmore College, which was 70% girls and 30% guys.
There you go.
At that time. And so I went to go visit for the weekend, and I decided not to go back to acting school, and to become more enlightened.
Sure.
At Skidmore.
Yeah.
And I had a great old time at Skidmore, and met some wonderful people there, and had a great time. But then I got to a certain thing called exam week.
Uh-huh.
And I realized that it was time for me to move on again. And this time, I got it in. Somebody was at the I don't know, the Rathskeller or what do you call it, the student union.
Uh-huh.
And somebody was reading a letter from a friend of theirs from a sheep station in Australia. And this was a long time ago, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's what I got to do. I want to go to Australia. So I got a whole bunch of guys together. We all went to the library. We cracked open the atlas. And I closed my eyes and I put my finger down. It was Wagga Wagga, Australia. Everybody was going. We're all going to Wagga Wagga. Blah 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 blah. And then by the end of the summer, it was just me and Mad Dog Madden were going to go. This guy Pete Madden, and I were going to go. And then at the last minute, like September rolled around and he bailed out. And so it was just me, and I ended up doing it. I landed in New Zealand, in Auckland. And then I went down to the Milford Trek, which is at the bottom, which is in the South Island. And then I traveled up again, and then I went across to Australia, and then I landed in Adelaide and went to Melbourne, and then took the train all the way across the country to Perth, where they were having the America's Cup at the time, and had a great old time in Perth, and then went back to Sydney, and then from Sydney I got in some sort of a game where we decided we were all going to swap airline tickets, and I ended up going to Malaysia.
Wow.
And from there I went to Malaysia, and then I went to India, and then I went to Nepal. And that was just an amazing, Nepal was like, it was like walking around in a National Geographic.
Yeah.
So just awesome. And at that time I was very much enthralled with Indiana Jones.
Oh,
so
sure.
I was imagining, as I was flying from one location to the other, that there was a red line being
right
from one location to the next. So I went there, but when I started that trip, when I landed in Auckland, and I was all by myself, and I was going staying in the youth hostel, and all that kind of stuff, and I went to go see a movie. I went to go see a movie called Birdie, which was Nicolas Cage and Matthew Modine.
Okay.
And it was pretty random, but it was I've never seen it since.
Yeah.
I saw it in the movie theater, and it affected me so much that I was like, that's what I should be doing. I've got to get going. I got to get back and do that. So even though I traveled for a year, I traveled for, I think, a little bit more than 11 months. And the whole time from the very beginning, in the back of my head was like, you got to go. You got to get back there. You got to go do it. And I always knew that because I was a huge fan of Bill Murray and John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd and all the early Saturday Night Live guys. And when I found out that they all came from Second City, Chicago, I was like, well, that's the place. I got to go there. And so when I came back from Australia, I worked on Martha's Vineyard for a summer and made a bunch of money there, and then drove out with a friend of mine, and we went, and we did it in the fall, and we went to every party up and down the eastern seaboard and through into Michigan, like every college weekend, whenever they were having the Oktoberfest and what have you. And then I ended up in Chicago, and then I lived in Chicago for, I think, 11 years, and I did Second City, and I did the Improv Olympic. Well, that's where I started.
Right.
And, I met my wife there, had a kid there, then moved out to Los Angeles.
Wow, so it's interesting to go back a bit, the Australian walkabout. You're not the first guest I've had that's had that experience. So I guess that's it's funny. He's a video game developer, and he didn't know what he was going to do. So he's like, well, I'm going to go to Australia, and then he had the whole, and then while he was there, he was enlightened. So I guess that's the point of an Australian walkabout. But it's interesting.
I honestly think you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Because number one, the people are fantastic.
Sure.
They're like the nicest, most easygoing people. That's where the term "no worries" comes from.
Right.
Is Australia, and that's just their thing. It's like, don't worry about it. And most of the people when I was there, all the guys that I was hanging out with, these were people in their 20s. They were all on the dole, so they were all getting welfare or whatever, and so they were just partying and going to the beach and getting drunk and having a good time. And they were just the best people, and they were so nice, and they were always so hospitable to me, and were always so nice to me. So I loved it. I loved it, and it was like the perfect adventure place. And it's really great. It's very dangerous in terms of the things that are living there.
Yeah.
The animals that are there.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And then you have a place like New Zealand, and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing bad in New Zealand.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can attack you in New Zealand.
I mean, it's the most archetypal paradise. If you want to use a picture of paradise, you take a picture from New Zealand, any one part of its climates, because they all look amazing. So, yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And then at the very bottom of the South Island, they have this Milford Trek, but at the very bottom of that, there's like these fjords, which are mountains that are coming out of the ocean.
Yeah.
And that's just like unbelievable.
Yeah, I need to go eventually. It's on the list.
some point. But
well, I tell you, the other thing is do it early. I don't know how old you are, but do it early, because once you reach a certain age or you get on a track or you're trying to do something, you can't stop and take a year and go do that, then come back.
Sure.
It's harder. And it's like, actually, taking a year is like ridiculous.
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine that. But it was so much fun. But it was really interesting, too, because in a way it was a little bit like being dead, because everybody's life was continuing on.
Sure.
And you were completely removed from everything that was going on. And every once in a while I'd get a letter or something, but I was moving so often.
Sure.
There wasn't really time to catch up.
Yeah, and you know, it's not like today. You could go traveling somewhere and stay totally connected. That's not the same necessarily experience. You can make it that way if you want it to be so, but sometimes.
I guess that's true. I had forgotten that. Yeah, now you could just carry your phone around, and everybody could go with you. Yeah.
And that's what people do. But so you were saying Scarsdale was a sheltered community. Was it a small town? Was there a common industry there or something?
It's a small town, but it's about 45 minutes outside of New York City.
Okay.
And it's a very, very wealthy community. It's like the sister city to Beverly Hills.
Okay.
Very everybody that got out of school there goes on to the Ivy League, and unfortunately, this is a horrible statistic, but I believe that like every year there was a kid that killed themselves because they didn't get into Princeton, or they didn't get into. I mean, it was like it was really sick, and it wasn't. I had a really nice childhood, and I really did enjoy it, and it was beautiful and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes the people were not really my people, because they didn't really talk, and there was like I guess maybe I was just young and I didn't know everybody in the town, but when I moved to Chicago, those were my people, because they were so open and friendly and talked to me, and you knew the guy who was the dry cleaner, and you knew the butcher, and you knew everybody by name, and it was just such a different community. The people were just so nice.
Yeah, it's interesting that
the people in Scarsdale were nice too, but it was very different. It was the 70s.
Sure.
People were like, like when we have a soccer game or whatever, like there would be all these dads and all their new girlfriends, and just like the families, So it was it was definitely a different time.
Well, it's interesting that you say that about Chicago being, more inviting than the small town, because usually the narrative goes the other way, but it seems like, especially in your case, that people can be less down to earth when they have more money or whatever. I don't know if you can track it necessarily, but that seems to be the case.
Well, I think people also were anybody that's really wealthy. I mean, this is what I believe. Because anybody that's really wealthy works really hard. There's nobody that skips out of that model. And I don't know whatever they do, but they work really hard at that, and they work a lot of hours.
Mm-hmm.
When they come home to their house, they would basically have a cocktail, and they just kind of like
shut off.
Themselves. They weren't outgoing. So, but the people in Chicago, the downside of Chicago is that there's nothing around it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're really just out in the middle of the prairie there. I mean, there's some fun stuff to do in Wisconsin or whatever, but it's basically Chicago is the hub of that whole area, and everybody realizes that there's nowhere to go, and there's great theater there.
Sure.
And there's great theater. There's great music. There's great food. And then what's really awesome is that the weather is so bad and so cold that all the losers and the whiners leave.
Yeah.
They get out and they go to move to Florida. And all the cool people that are going to stick it out hang in Chicago. It's a great town.
I mean, it's one of the. No, I haven't. I'm unfortunately very sheltered in the travel, but it is something that I trying to open up. I just went to New York for the first time a couple of years ago, so I live in Arizona, which is not a place I really love, but originally from California and stuff. But yeah, basically West Coast kid. So and never really went past that. But yeah, I mean it's one of the great cities.
You got to go to Boston.
Yeah.
You got to go to Boston and you got to go to Chicago.
Well, everyone. I mean,
Boston and Chicago. Actually, have you ever been to Seattle?
No. I'm pretty. I've been to Canada and California and Arizona. That's pretty much my wheelhouse. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get out there.
Yeah. There seems to be only a few like real cities in America, because Phoenix, where I'm at, is not really a city like those places, like Chicago or Boston or even New York, obviously, but it's just a conglomeration of suburbs rather than a real city. So
well, usually I think what makes the difference, I mean, this just could be me,
mm-hmm.
but I think it has to have a waterfront.
Sure.
You have to be connected to the water.
Yeah.
Because all those three of them are all very connected to the water. Lake Michigan, the Atlantic Ocean, and the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Seattle is a great city too.
Yeah.
And that's a really fun. And it's a real city. Like it's hot.
Sure.
Things are going on.
Sure. Yeah, that is.
You got to hit it in May though. You got to hit it in May, because you hit it any other time, it can be kind of depressing.
Yeah. Right. So did you go into the city a lot, or what did your parents do? I know those are two separate questions, but was there comedy going on in the house? Was there an appreciation for show business? What was the tone?
My father was very funny. He was very smart, and he was a businessman, and he worked for a light fixture company. That was his last. He was like the vice president at this light fixture company.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a very sharp guy. Unfortunately, he was killed in a car accident, so he was taken out of the picture. But he was very funny. He was also like the basketball coach and the Cub Scout leader, but my brother was the businessman. And so my brother pursued that aspect, but I always saw his sense of humor and how funny he was, and what a reaction it got from people about like how clever he was. And so I started doing that in school, pretty early on.
Sure.
And I think that's where that kind of came from. And I would go into the city, but not really for anything, not really for shows or
sure.
anything, but more of just, we went in for like concerts and stuff like that.
Mm. Just to mess around, basically, to go into the city?
Yeah. But we, it was kind of, like I said, it was kind of sheltered, so people were really scared of the city.
Yeah.
And I think there was definitely that. And then when we started going, we were like, whoa, what was there to be scared of? This place is awesome.
Yeah.
My favorite place, one of my favorite places on the planet is a bar called McSorley's.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been? Did you get a chance to go to McSorley's?
No. It was a 10-day thing. My girlfriend lived there for a time, so she had been living there for a year or so, and so I came out to visit. But no.
Where was she living? What part?
She was in the financial district. She was pretty much as far south Manhattan as you could get. She lived. Okay. She was going to school at the time at Pace University down there. It's a little private school, but but it was cool. She had been there many times before, but obviously living there is a different experience. So it was cool to have her treat me to like the residence experience rather than like the the touristy type things. But we didn't really get to experience much of that world necessarily.
McSorley's is a bar that I think has been around. Oh no, I think earlier than that, like 1865.
Wow.
No, 1857. I think is. I'm not 100% sure, but it's amazing. It's still like exactly where it was.
So it must be pretty far down there then, because it couldn't be too uptown if it's that old. Okay.
It's right by Astor Place.
That makes sense.
And,
yeah.
When Lincoln did his Cooper Union address, he went over to McSorley's and had a beer.
Wow.
I mean, it's a great place.
Yeah.
It's a great place, and it has all these artifacts. Like, I remember it has the front page from when the Titanic sank is up on the wall. There's these great. Oh, this is unbelievable. When I started going there when I was probably 18 years old, and since it was high school and whatever, I was probably 16 or 17 years old. The drinking age was 18 back then.
Sure.
But there's this gas lamp that hangs over the bar, and it had these wishbones that were all like in a line on top of the thing, and there was like an inch of dust on top of these wishbones.
Mm.
And it's like turkey wishbones, like the big ones.
Uh-huh.
And I remember my friends and I, we were like 16, 17 years old, and we were like afraid the dust was going to get in our beer. Like, we were. But when we asked the bartender, he said that those were from a bunch of guys that used to drink there before World War One, and they all, before they left to go to France, they got wishbones and they put them up there, and they were going to break them when they came back. And those ones that are still up there are the ones, the guys that didn't come back.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. I mean, that's
some heavy stuff.
You go there. Oh, it's awesome, though. But I tell you, you go there, if you're ever in New York City on a snowy or rainy afternoon,
mm-hmm.
go to McSorley's where there's nobody going to be there. It's going to be like empty, and sit in those front windows and just look out at New York. It's the best.
I'll have to go. We're planning a return trip hopefully soon. I love it there. So you back to where we were talking about before. You went out to Chicago, and I mean, so Second City was the goal. Was the goal that Second City on the way to SNL, or because you were saying the SNL guys were kind of the inspiration there? What was the plan? I didn't know, because like I said, I had been to acting school a little bit earlier on, and I had done a bunch of plays in high school, and I saw myself more as an actor than a comic. Like I just didn't know that I would have the writing ability to do that. Sure.
But what I found out was I was reading at the time, John Belushi had recently passed, and there was a book written about him called Wired. Yeah,
it's a controversial book.
Right. Well, I basically took that as a roadmap of where I needed to go and who I needed to see.
Yeah.
And they talked about Del Close as being this mad genius of improvisation. And so I was like, oh, well, if Del Close is still around, that's who I gotta find. And so when I went to Chicago, and I was working in a bar called Butch McGuire's. And when I was working there, one of the other bartenders was at this other place called the Improv Olympic. And he was like, come and see my show. And I went to go see the show. And when I was looking in the playbill or whatever they had, the little flyer or whatever it was, it said that Del Close was the guy who was teaching the classes.
Right.
I was like, no way. And so I immediately was like, I'm in. I'm going to do this. And it was awesome, but it was so intimidating and so scary to do improv like that.
And you did it with? Did you do it with Del?
I did it with Del. I mean, we didn't. He just taught us. He didn't.
Sure. Yeah.
But
no.
I did it when I was doing it though. I did it with a guy named Dave Keckner. Was one of the guys who's in. You know him from.
He's
Anchorman.
Yeah, he does all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of stuff. And then Mike Myers, I remember he was on my team for a while when he had just come from Canada, and he was waiting for his green card to go join Second City. He played with us for like 2 or 3 months. Tim Meadows, Horatio Sands, Amy Poehler, Tina Fey. I mean, the list goes on.
Sure.
Everybody was there at that time. Steve Carell.
So when was this? Mid-late 80s?
Late 80s. Yeah, late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That's awesome. That's the incubation period for them.
Chris Farley was on the other team. That was our team, and then the other team, and
wow.
Chris Farley was on the other team. And
so I guess I bet.
And then the best part of it was that we would all, it was so much fun to do these improv shows. But then after the improv shows, we'd all party till 4 o'clock in the morning every night for years. It was ridiculous. It was crazy, but it was a lot of fun. And they're all, I have to say, of all those people, there's not one of them that I could be like, he was kind of a wiener or he was kind of a jerk. They were all nice people. Colbert's a super nice guy.
Yeah.
Carell's a nice guy. Horatio, all these people. Tina and Amy are both really wonderful people. They're all nice people. And I really think that has a lot to do with Chicago, because being a jerk in Chicago just doesn't fly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome that you were there.
New York. I think it flies in New York. I think it flies in LA, but it just didn't. And it's nice though because I find now when we have guest people or people that are come on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and they're like, oh yeah, this guy, he's from Chicago. He said he knew you or whatever, and he knew of you or whatever. And I'm like, oh, he's gonna be okay. He's probably gonna be good at what he does, but also he's gonna be a nice guy.
Sure. I have a theory that there's people that have a notorious reputation for being awful in show business, but I think the majority of people that go anywhere are typically pretty good people. You have to be to kind of.
Oh, I think so.
To pull there can be a cynical theory there that that's not the case, but I don't know. It wouldn't fly like you said in other situations. You got to work with people, so.
Right, and it makes all the difference because honestly, the whole thing about any of this business is collaboration.
Sure.
Is working with people. And you making their stuff better, or they're making you funnier, or whatever the deal is. But my theory on the jerk or no jerk is usually people that don't know why they're successful, like they don't know like what their actual thing is that they do.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually kind of jerky because they're just not sure. They're not confident in what they do. And people that really know what they're doing and really have a sense of, how they prepare and how they do it and how they perform, those people have got a lot of confidence and they don't have any reason to step on other people.
Sure.
But then again, there are other people that have all those things.
Sure, there are exceptions to the rule, but it seems that seems to be the pervading sense that I get being an outsider and just hearing the stories and such. But
I think that's pretty true though.
So you were doing Improv Olympic or IO, I guess we have to call it now, and Second City, and so what was how long were you doing that before you thought, let's go out to LA? Did you want to end up doing what you did do, which is do TV? What was the idea there?
Well, I always knew that that's what I wanted to do,
mm-hmm.
and there had been a bunch of work in Chicago in the early 80s,
mm-hmm.
the mid 80s, and then for some reason that all kind of dried up at that time. I forget what the shows were, but there were a couple of different shows that were there that kind of left. So there wasn't really the opportunity to do TV and film in Chicago, which was a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody for years had made fun and demonized Los Angeles.
Sure.
Never going out there, whatever. And so that hung on until everybody left.
Yeah.
And it was the weirdest thing, but I think it was 95, 96, and everybody left.
Yeah.
It was just like the train pulled up and everybody got on, and it was weird. But we had also done a bunch of things, so it was the right trajectory.
Sure.
Because a lot of people we did a show called Jazz Freddy with a whole group of I think 13 improvisers from all these different groups, and we mashed them all together, and we did this improv show that I directed. And it was huge. It was like everybody loved it. And then they picked all the people from the show to put them in Second City. And so then people did Second City. And then some people went on and did Saturday Night Live. And so it was like everybody was just progressing. Everybody had just kind of grown out of it.
Uh-huh.
And at the time I was directing at Second City and I was teaching and I was, acting in commercials and doing all kinds of stuff like that. And I realized and I just bought a house with my wife, and I realized that this is it. This is I'm just going to become, this is as much as I can do. I'm
sure.
not going to get better at this, but I'm not. This is the ceiling here.
Right.
And so I was like, I think I told my wife, I was like, I think I got to go and see what it's like. And to her credit, she was like, go.
Right.
Absolutely, go. I don't want to be the one that held you back from, doing your thing. But she had a great argument. She was like, go, go for 3 months, 6 months, whatever. See what you think. If it doesn't happen for you, then, come back and we won't sell the house. We'll just stay here. And you'll come back and we'll have our house and we'll continue on and live our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great. And so I came out to Los Angeles and, within a couple of weeks, I got an agent and a manager and all that stuff. And then I started to book jobs, and I started to work right away. And I started to do a whole bunch of commercials back then. And so it really seemed like, it was time to make the move. So unfortunately, my wife, Susie, who grew up in Chicago and I don't think really ever wanted to leave, she came out to Los Angeles, and, we all moved out here and started here in Los Angeles.
Well, and I mean, like you said, to her credit, she gave you the opportunity, and that. It looks like, looking at your IMDb or your resume, or whatever, it looks like you never stopped working. You keep it pretty busy.
No,
it seems.
Yeah, I always. Yeah, and what's so funny is that it definitely went in stages.
Sure.
Where when I first started out, I didn't know anything, so I was just I was so focused on money and status as far as what kind of a job it was. Was it a guest star, was it recurring, whatever.
Right.
And I was only focused on those two things, and I kind of let the love of the work kind of dry up a little bit inside of me, until I got to about halfway from between where I started and where I am now, where I started to realize I don't even know if I like doing this. I don't even know why I'm doing it anymore. And I just started, and then I remember I was doing a commercial audition when I had to bring my son with me because a babysitter canceled or something, and he was about 6 or 7, and I had to take my pants off, and I was like the guy who was the life of the party in his boxer shorts taking Polaroids or whatever. And I ran off, and it was a callback, and I was all excited, and I took my pants off, and and my son looked at me, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And then it made me stop and look at myself, and I was like, "What am I doing? Where am I going? Where am I going with this?"
Yeah.
And I really started. I made a transition at that point where I went back to acting class, and I really started to work on what I was doing and the craft that I was pursuing, rather than the money and the jobs and whatever, because it becomes very hollow after a while if that's all you're doing.
Yeah.
And also I really saw improv as my art and my art form, and I saw acting and TV and stuff like that as my job.
Right.
So I didn't love it the way that I needed to love it to continue on and to move forward. And then when I started to go back to acting classes and started to work on stuff, you start to realize that there's things that you're not doing that's holding you back, and that you're holding you back. That it's not casting directors, and it's not your headshot, and it's not your agent.
Right.
It's you. You're not doing it. And I started to realize that I had a problem with emotion. I didn't want to really experience it in front of other people. I wanted to fake it. So once I kind of started to deal with that, that made all the difference. It made a huge difference in who I was and what I was doing and the work I was doing. And then as soon as I addressed that and really started to deal with that, my whole thing opened up. And then I wasn't focused on what the work was. I was just focused on how I was doing the job. I didn't care what the job was.
Sure, finding your appreciation or whatever within it, regardless of the outer status, as you said before.
Yeah.
I think that's all you can do, really.
Right. Well, I didn't realize that. I was much more focused on product before, and then now I was much more focused on process. And once I made that turn, and then the other thing that I think is really, made a pivotal change is when you realize that you are your gold. You are, not you being the next whoever, or, doing it the way that you saw somebody else do it.
Right.
But if you can figure out what your voice is and bring that to the table, nobody else can do that. Only you can do that. And it's true in any art form, any sort of creative, endeavor. If you can figure out, and that's why I originally noticed it in books, where I was just like, wow, this person is just spilling their heart out to me in this book. And I'm just like, wow, holy smokes. So is that artist and that painting and that theater and that thing. I started to realize, you have to share yourself. And if you ever find yourself, and this goes out to anybody that's listening, but if you ever find yourself where you're not making it to the next level or you're not moving up, you're not sharing yourself. You're not giving the part of you that's not easy to give.
Yeah.
That's the tricky part. That's why they pay people a lot of money, because it's not necessarily always going to be fun.
Sure.
But that's what really makes the difference. And then when I realized that, that's when things really started to.
So what was that voice that you discovered, and when was that in the timeline? What were you doing at that point? Were you doing guest spots, or what was the work looking like at that time?
The work at that time was theater. I was actually doing plays, and plays are not a big deal here in Los Angeles. It's
right.
not something that anybody cares about. It's a
sure.
TV and film town.
Yeah.
But for me, you just can't. There's nothing to hide behind. There's no
right.
editing. There's no second take, and you start to realize what do you really understand and what do you not really understand in the script. And then the great thing, when I was in Chicago and I had done plays, I would do it like whatever worked, and I would do it the same night after night after night after night. Like I thought that was the job.
Right.
Because I had been working in commercials, and in commercials, they wanted you to do take after take
right.
after take. That was exactly the way that they had dialed you in. And so I thought that was the way to do it. And then I realized by going to class and stuff that I was like, no way, that's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah.
That's when you're just like a robot. And
right.
then I started to realize, it's like, and this is going to sound ridiculously stupid, but it took me the longest time to marry improv and acting. And when I married the two, and I realized that I could improvise within those lines, I didn't
sure.
have to change the lines per se.
Yeah.
But I could improvise the way that I would react each time and the way that I would, say them, whatever. Oh, I realized what freedom I had, and that. I mean, I used to want to always do everything once. I just wanted to do one take, and that would be that. And then I sort of realized the power of like, oh, no, I can do it 100 different ways. And that's when so it was really doing the plays that I started to do that. And then I started to bring it into, I was doing a lot of commercial work. And then I just kind of gave up on doing what I thought they wanted. And I started to do what I thought I could bring to it. And then I started improvising while I was shooting the commercials, and nobody ever complained. They were just like, great. Or if they did complain, if I did that in an audition, I realized that, oh, well, they just don't want to do it the way that I would do it, so that's fine. We won't work together. And then I kind of let go of that whole thing of like, oh, I want to please you. I want to do it the way you want to do it. And when you find like-minded people, you're collaborating, and you're working together, and you're creating something together. So I started to get into that idea, and that really is where that's when I grew my mustache too, was I started to be like, screw it. I want to do what I want to do. And, my time will be up before, you know it. So I'm going to just do whatever. And as soon as I grew that stupid mustache, which at that time, this is before mustaches became whatever. But it was because at that time it was like commercial suicide. They're like, oh, you can't have a porn stash.
Yeah.
Not a porn stash, number one. But also I was just like, my father had a mustache. So it was definitely, I think that's initially where I think this came from. And then my brother always had a mustache early on in the 80s. My grandfather had a mustache. My cousins had mustaches. So it was definitely a part of my background.
Sure.
So it wasn't something that I was putting on for somebody to like, be like, oh, what do you think of this? I was like, I want to do this. I hope you don't mind. So,
well, it's a great comedic tool in a way. I'm not trying to say you look silly or something, but it is though. It does add something to the character of whoever you're playing or whatever, and it's a distinguishing thing.
It's a visual medium.
Yeah.
It's a visual medium.
Yeah.
You see me before you hear me.
Yeah.
And so when you see me come on screen, you look and you're like, oh, this guy. That's the first thing. And then I start to talk, and they're like, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, this guy's nuts, or whatever. This guy thinks he's cooler than he is, or this guy, whatever. But it helped me to do less. I could do even less because I didn't have to work so hard because you already get it. Like,
Right.
you already see who this guy is or what's going to happen. And I actually do like it. I actually like the way it looks on me. And so, I mean, I've had it almost, I don't know, like 8 years, something like that.
Wow.
I've had it for a while now. But it's always worked for me. It's always for whatever the things, when I did Eagle Heart, you know, I had it the whole time I did Eagle Heart. And I did it when I had it for the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and I've had it for all kinds of stuff. And I had it for Project X. I had it for a bunch of stuff. And I really like it. I mean, it definitely makes you older. So, like, as you're getting older, you don't want to or look older.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's like, I may shave it off at some point, you know, for a different part or something like that.
Yeah.
Or to play a dad. Usually the mustache and little kids don't go well together for
Sure.
some reason, and some people whatever. But I do like it. But it was definitely, it was a turning point for me of like, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and if people don't like it, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, that's great, and that you're taking agency into your own hands, and that's, you know, obviously very important in the what can be a soul sucking kind of experience for certain people that don't adapt or rather stay true to themselves, try to adapt when they shouldn't necessarily. So that's good.
Right.
So what were some of the early TV roles or film roles that you're like, okay, I'm starting to build up steam here, and you were starting to really have fun, you know, with the work rather than feeling kind of aimless?
I would definitely say, I did a movie. I don't know. I had some that I didn't, that didn't really do much for me, and then they were right after. It was around the time where I grew the mustache, so it was about 8 years ago when I really started to feel like I did Project X, and I can't remember what year that was, but I think there was a couple things before. Oh, I did Bones.
Uh-huh.
You know the TV show Bones?
Yeah.
I did the TV show Bones, and I really felt like that was the first show that I had done where I really felt like, oh, look at me, I'm driving. I'm not sitting back waiting to see what's going to happen.
Sure.
And I'm not being passive. I'm driving this thing, and I'm adding things here and there a little bit, and they're letting that stay, and they're not. I mean, who knows? They may have edited it out. I'm not sure.
Sure.
But I really felt like, oh, wow, this is a totally different experience. And then I did that again on Project X, and when I did Project X, I only had one scene.
Yeah.
And I did the scene, and like a month later, they called me back, and they're like, we want you to do more stuff. We want to put you in a couple more scenes. So they were like, why don't you, could you do this, and what would you do there, or how about this? And I improvised a bunch for them in the office. And then I went back and I did another week of shooting on Project X. And that really felt like, oh, wow, like this is different.
Yeah.
This is totally different. They're I mean, that's expensive for a movie production to go back and shoot more stuff. That's not cheap. And so I was like, wow, that's a huge tip of the hat. And I was like, oh, wow, that was pivotal for me. And then once your confidence goes up, and then I did something on Psych that was really fun, and they improvised a lot. I had a buddy that wrote on that show, and that was just fun. And I had a great time playing with all the people up there, and that was just and then I would go back and I'd do a play, and then I'd do more TV and stuff, and then I'd go back and do a play, and then whatever. And it just kind of grew and grew, and then by the point that I got to Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, I had actually auditioned for it the first time when it was supposed to be at Showtime.
Right, yeah.
And I had auditioned for it, and I really had fun, and I improvised a little bit, but then nothing came of it because when I was working on The Brink with Jack Black and Tim
Roth. Oh, right, HBO.
Was HBO show.
Right.
Yeah, HBO thing. but I couldn't get off. I couldn't be released to go to their studio for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So they went with another guy, and then, but actually they were like, well, we've got people, so it's too bad you can't make it, but we've got other people.
Yeah.
And so I was a little devastated by that because I was started work at 7 a.m. and I finished work at like 7:30, and there was all this downtime, and the thing was going on at 2:30 in the afternoon, and I was like, please let me just go, and they were like, we can't release you because if you don't come back for whatever reason, you get in a car accident or whatever, and you don't come back at 7:30. Everybody's gonna go bananas.
Yeah, it's gonna cost them $70,000 for every minute that you're not here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're like, we just can't take the chance. I'm sorry about that, but we can't.
Yeah.
And so I was so bummed. And then a year later, I had forgotten all about it, and I was actually on my way to Israel to shoot something for some commercial in Israel for the tourism board. And I got a call like 2 days before I was going to leave. And they're like, oh, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. They were wondering if you want to audition for Daryl again. And I was like, yeah, sure, but I'm going to be going out of town. And they're like, well, put yourself on tape and send it to them. And I did it with my son Dexter, who's like, I guess he was like 10 or 11 at the time. And he put me on tape because he's like a film student. So he put me on tape, and I really barely looked at the sides. I looked at it and I improvised. I goofed around. And I was like, whatever, we'll see what happens. But I'm because also when you have a job, you're like, well, whatever. Sure.
You're not as hungry as you could be. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I was like, and this is a TV show. It's like such a bigger job. But anyway, so then they liked it, and they're like, well, come in and audition. And I was like, well, I'm leaving town on Thursday, so I can't really do it. Anyway, long story short, they put me on tape. And I read with Rachel. We had a lot of fun reading together. We improvised a whole bunch while I was auditioning. And then I went to Israel, and then my tape went to the studio test and the network test. And there were 3 or 4 other guys that were actually reading, and my tape went around. And then I got that job. And that was huge for me because I had always there have been so many times where people were like, oh, we love you.
Sure.
We thought you were great, but you came in second.
Yeah.
I just heard that so many times, and then finally they were like, it's you. You're it.
I'm guessing you'd done some pilots, too, that never went or stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah, so it was a common experience.
I did a pilot. There's always a good experience in them, though. I did a pilot with a guy that was my childhood idol. I don't know if that's the right word, but he was on. His name is Jay Thomas, and Jay Thomas was on the radio. He's been in a bunch of TV shows. He was on Murphy Brown.
Oh, sure, okay.
Husband or whatever. You know that guy, right? He was on Mork and Mindy. He was on Cheers as
Carmen's husband. Yeah, I just looked him up
He was on the radio when I was in like junior high or high school. I guess it was junior high. And he was the morning DJ. And I used to steal all his bits and do them in the lunchroom. And then I was doing, I forget what the name of the show is now, but I did a pilot with him. And I was just like, oh my God, I got to hang out with Jay Thomas for like a week. I mean, that was awesome. Those experiences of getting to meet people that you've idolized or seen or like have always wanted to meet.
Sure.
That was just for me, but especially because it was very specific to me that Jay Thomas.
Right.
Like everybody loves Bill Murray and everybody loves Jim Carrey and whatever.
Yeah.
Jay Thomas was, and also Jay Thomas loves to talk and tell stories. So he was not like, don't bother me. He was more than glad to like, come on, let's go get a cup of coffee and I'll tell you stories and stuff. I still think he's one of the greatest guys. He's just such a fun, great guy.
That's awesome. So
that was a treat.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've had some moments like that. Some people have probably seen you in some, like, because you've just been in so many TV shows and movies and stuff like that, someone's probably seen you come across you somehow. Hangover and
commercials.
Yeah, and sure, yeah. Yeah. National and
the commercial thing. Yeah, that commercial, like a funny commercial that gets played over and over and
yeah.
over and over and over and over and over. It gets into people's like. So that's why people really like. Before, people like, only now are people like. I mean, this actually was a funny thing. A kid came up to me in New York when we were doing the Vulture thing, and I happened to be with my mom, and we had done this a game show or something. It was us against the Orange is New Black ladies, and we were doing a pop culture quiz thing that was very funny and very silly.
Yeah.
But we were leaving there, and we were walking across the street and whatever, and somebody came running up to me like, "Excuse me, are you Pete Gardner from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend?" And my mom couldn't believe it. That's like probably one of maybe a handful of times that anybody's known my name.
Sure.
And said, "Aren't you?" Whatever.
That guy from that thing.
Did it in front of my mom. That was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the time, people will just look at me and be like, "Ah, I know you. It's funny when you do that," or whatever. But they're just, and especially it happens at like Home Depot or wherever there's more than a few hundred people gathered.
Sure. Statistically, that's going to be the case.
Yeah, which is perfectly fine by me. And the thing that I realized, I have friends that like Neil Flynn. Neil Flynn is the guy who's on The Middle. He was the janitor. And
duh. I was trying to think of who. And you were on The Middle in an episode, right?
I was.
Yeah.
I did an episode of The Middle, and that was a lot of fun. But I was hanging out. I knew Neil since Chicago. When I was directing at Second City, we brought him in to be in he replaced somebody in one of the casts. And so I got to know him pretty well and get to be friends with him. And my wife, I think, was like redecorating his house or helping him with something, pick up furniture or whatever. And I got to watch him interact with people. And he did it in such a way that I was like, wow, if I ever get the opportunity, that's the way I'll handle it. Because he made it all about them. Because they were like, "Oh, wow, you're the janitor from Scrubs," and whatever. And he'd be like, "Hi, I'm Neil, and you are." And they'd be like, "Oh, I'm Larry." And then he'd be like, "Oh, hi, Larry, it's nice to meet you." And then instantly they became normal people talking, rather than like, "You're the guy from TV," blah, 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 blah. And it's so nice. And what you realize though is that it's not about me. It's about their experience. They're like, "Oh my God, I'm seeing a guy from television."
Sure.
And so that it's all about them. And so you just facilitate it for them. I mean, it's really all about them. It's nice to be recognized, but it really is their experience.
And there's usually
my wife.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. You go ahead.
I was just going to say there's usually a whole bundle of emotions wrapped up in whatever you were in or whatever. They probably spent hours watching it or whatever, and then that's what the connection is. Yeah.
Yeah, and people are always, knock wood.
Yeah.
People are always so nice and so positive, and the Getting By song from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, that means so much to so many people, and it's just so nice to be a part of that experience that it touched them in some way. I can understand though that if you were at a much different level than I'm at, like where people noticed you the second you walked into every room and everybody was checking you out all the time, I think that would be really uncomfortable. I don't know why. I don't know that I would ever I don't think that's anything to aspire to. That seems to be like that would be too much.
Right.
So if people were just like if you got on a train and everybody in the train turned to look because you were on the train, that would be weird. That would be really weird. But if like one or two people notice and they smile at you and they wave or they say something when you get off the train, I like that. That's nice. It's really nice to have that interaction.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Getting By song because I just seen there was I'm trying to find it right now. I think it was like on Decider or something, but there was like a 50 most important LGBT characters on TV, and someone I followed was retweeting someone listing his 50 in response to it, and Daryl Whitefeather was one of the characters he put down. So I thought that was awesome. So I thought that was a cool, and it was like just earlier today. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I got to remember to mention that because that is an important character to to people. So it's cool.
Absolutely. And you know what's so beautiful is that it all comes from a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Like there's no – see, that's the thing that's so different, I think, about the show and other places where there'd be a bisexual character.
Mm-hmm.
So many – and that's why that song is – because that song checks off.
Yeah, right.
Bisexual people are like, oh, man. Because every time – like I have friends that were watching this show that are bisexual that said they were just waiting for it to be like, oh, nope.
Hit the cliche territory stuff or, yeah.
And just make it a joke.
Yeah.
And that would be like used as a punchline. But that it actually was just, Daryl as a character is very funny and does really goofy stuff, but that wasn't part of it.
Right.
That was just the relationship.
It's just who he is.
And it was good.
Yeah.
And when they told me that I got the job. I didn't even know that was part of the character at all.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got the job, they brought me in for a writer's lunch where I met with all the writers, and the writers told me like what they had coming up and stuff like that. And they showed me the thing, and they were like, okay, so here's episode 5. That's when you're going to have your first song about you're singing about I love my daughter, but not in a creepy way. And I was like, okay, well, good. I can get ready for that. And then they went down, and then they're like, oh, here's episode 11 where you discover you're bisexual. And then I was like, all right. I was so excited because it just meant that I wasn't going to be the bumbling boss.
Right.
Like it wasn't going to just be that one joke over and over and over, that there was going to have some depth to the character. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is going to be great.
Well, I think that's the whole experience with the whole show. Not that anyone thinks it was going to be one thing or the other, but it's just it's very smart. At the end of the day, it's just very clever and doesn't rely on cheap kind of things. It has a facade of that, or some people might think that, but it's very subversive, I guess is the word that I could use there. That to make you kind of redirect your expectations. So that's
right.
That's I think the key thing about it.
You think you're watching, and you think you're watching. Sometimes it can be very silly, and it's got this music. But when you think about what people are actually doing and what they're going through and all those things, there's a good message in there. There's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of progressive ideas in there, and it's really fun to be a part of. It really is, because it comes from a good place. It comes from a really genuine, warm place from the two main writers, which is Aline Brosh McKenna and Rachel Bloom.
Yeah, another great. And I came upon you from Eagleheart, which is
really?
incredibly silly show in a different way, obviously. But it's I just wanted, how was that experience? So how did you get the job? And Chris Elliott is one of those guys that I think is underrated when it comes to the great comedic forces, I guess, out there, because he's hilarious in everything he does, even the kind of the stuff that gets panned. So how was it working on that show?
He is hilarious. I got that show where I worked on the pilot to that show, and I played a totally different character. I played a director, and it was a show inside of a show. Right. And so there was Eagleheart as a show, and then there was Eagleheart as with executives and the network and all that kind of stuff.
And that's something they touched on later too in the show, right? With the final season and stuff like that.
Yeah, not really though, because what happened was then Adult Swim said, we don't want the show in the show.
Okay.
We just want straight up Eagleheart. We just want that show as that show. Okay. And so they did that. And I had so much fun doing that, and they let me improvise, and I was kind of ballsy. That was definitely one of those times where I remember I did something. I added a line when something was blowing up or whatever, and I forget I can't remember what the line was, but I was doing it with Chris Elliott, and I could see after I said it. I mean, it was funny, but I could see after I said it that the writer and the director were starting to walk towards me. And that usually means like, hey, wait.
Take it down a notch here.
Yeah, exactly. And what was so great was Chris Elliott stepped stepped out in front of me and was like, no, that's going to be great. I'm going to say this, then he's going to say that, and that's going to work. And they turned around, and they never got to me, and they went back behind the camera.
That's awesome.
And I was like, that's awesome. Now, Chris Elliott, to me, is the king of the wise asses.
Yeah.
And being a wise ass myself, I was like, I was definitely I was standing among the gods when I was with him, and he was such a nice guy and such a cool guy, and I think he kind of thought I was a dork a lot of the time, which I am, but it was like he was really nice to me, where he was so cool. He was also another guy that I realized if I got the opportunity to be a regular on a show,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to do it the way he does it.
Sure.
Because he was nice to everybody. He made everybody feel inclusive. He did bits with everybody all the time. He didn't just disappear and go off to his trailer.
Right.
He was really a great guy and really funny. And then one of the really nice things, for me anyway, was as we were wrapping up the season, he also hung out with the crew more than he hung out with the actors. Like, he really liked the crew. And then, what's funny is I'm very much the same way on Crazy Ex-School, and I hang out with actors all the time. We have parties.
Sure.
We hang out all the time. But when we're on set, I find myself hanging out with all the crew people because a lot of them are more my age than the people in the show. And so we have much more of a connection. But one of the things that he would do, what Chris Elliott would do, is he'd have a little party in his trailer. Not party, but he'd have cocktails in his trailer after the show was over. Like after it was
That's
done.
Cool.
And that was so cool to get to go to that. And it only happened once, so maybe it only happened once. Maybe that was the only one that I knew about. But that was so fun to be invited to that. And it was the wardrobe lady, and it was the script supervisor, and it was the makeup guy. And there were people that he had known. And it was casual. It wasn't crazy. But it was just people unwinding and having a good time after the show. But for me, it was like, I just couldn't believe that I was there. He was such a wise ass, and he's so funny, and he's great. He's really funny.
Well,
did you ever see the episode where he was singing All That Jazz?
Yeah, no, I've watched the whole show. I've seen every episode. Yeah.
Oh my God, that was so funny and so awesome. He crushed that.
Yeah.
I love that, and I that show, to me, the writing on that show was so surreal and funny, but like brilliant in its own way.
It carried that Adult Swim flavor, and to your credit, every time you popped up on screen, I was delighted. I was like, all right, here's the weird, sad doctor sometimes, but also upbeat, and Doc Shades was hilarious, and so it was a great weird show, and it was just a little capsule of a show that is really fun. I also love Brett Gelman and Maria Thayer on there, or Thayer, I don't know how you pronounce her last name, but Brett Gelman I think you're right. is hilarious. He's done a lot of stuff for Adult Swim, and he's left them now, but he's popped up in movies and stuff, and he's great in everything he does too. So it was a cool cast.
Oh my God, there was a thing he did in that show. I can't remember, where he was talking to himself in the mirror, and then he would turn in the mirror, and there were the different sides of the mirror. Yeah. There were different people. Oh my God, it was so hilarious. I thought that was one of the funniest things I ever saw. He was great. He was really funny. Yeah.
So that's cool. That the experience has been great collaborations with a lot of people. It sounds like you're, maintaining a love for it, and you're fans of the people you work with, and that you're not getting, cynical or treating it just like it's just a job or whatever. So.
No, what's so great is I feel like I had that period early.
Sure.
And I don't know that I don't know how things will go as I continue on, but I just feel like I am so thankful for all the crazy, weird stuff that I did. I never in a million years would have thought that I'd be on a musical and get to sing and dance and do crazy stuff. And it's such a joy that extra challenge makes the show so exhilarating to me, because like if it was just the scenes, that would be fun, and I'd love it. I mean,
Yeah.
it would be fun. But once you've had a taste of getting to sing in a show, it's like it's so magical. It's truly magical. It's so fun, and it's such a great way to express yourself and also to express these comic ideas. I love it.
Right.
I just love it. And you know, I've been wanting to learn to play the ukulele, and I really want to do it, but you know, unless I'm really pushed to do something, I rarely commit and actually do it. And so when I got a song where it was like a song where I'm playing the ukulele to Paula, I was like, oh, I'm going to learn it and play it. And I did, and I was so happy and so excited about that. But I mean, I knew, you know, the ukulele is all muted, so you can't hear the strings while we're shooting the scenes. And so then we did a For Your Consideration thing for the Emmys, and they asked me, they were like, would you play the song and sing it? And I was like, sure. Oh my God, I don't even know if I can do that. It's so much harder than you think to play. At least, I don't know, you probably maybe play guitar.
No.
I was so surprised at how hard it was. You have to have the instrument cold so that you can sing it. Because you're thinking about other things while you're singing.
Right.
You're not thinking about, like, I got to move my fingers here and I got to keep strumming this. Oh, my God. I was so – and then when the first time that I did it, the first time I ever sang in public was with the show when we did a live version – or not a live version, but we did the songs from the show at Largo, which is a club here. And that was like 200 people. I had never sung in front of people. And I loved it. It was awesome. And then I did this ukulele thing in front of like 500 or 600 people for this For Your Consideration thing. But I love that about the show. I love the challenges.
Yeah.
And I love the things that I love to be put into situations where I'm not sure how it's going to go. But I also know that I have the support of Rachel and Aline, all my castmates and everybody. They always have my back. They're never like, well, that was pretty good.
Well, the show has created a supportive framework for you guys to play in. That's the best kind of show.
I know, and that's not always the case. You know?
Yeah.
It's not always sometimes it can be very product oriented.
Sure.
And everybody can be like, you know, and what's sad is I've worked on TV shows where people have their sides in their hands, and then they have their cell phone under their side. And once they're done saying their lines, they go onto their cell phone and continue to text. And you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just be here for this. I mean, this is the whole reason that you're on, you know, that you're famous is because you're on this show. Why don't you give it everything you got? And so when we're doing the show sometimes, and it gets to be 11:30 at night, and you know, we've been there for 16 hours.
Sure.
And people are tired of doing the scene, and people are like, oh, my God, I can't believe it's 11:30. And I honestly, I remember those times, and I'm like, where else you want to be? What else you want to be doing? Because this is what I want to do. I want to be making a comedy show on TV. So I'm excited. I could care, you know, and I try to keep that enthusiasm going for other people when, you know, it starts to wane. Because I've been around a little bit longer, and I've seen those times when you're in situations when it's not all gravy.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. I think the story is a good one. You're doing the good work, and I'm excited to see what's going on next with, you know, the show and whatever else you do. So, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, my pleasure, Tristan.
That was seriously really fun. I had a lot of fun talking to Pete. He was a really cool guy. Loved to talk with him. It's going to sound like a backhanded compliment, but I didn't really have to do much. I like the interviews where the person I'm talking to is very talkative. It's like I said, I can sound like passive aggressive or something. Totally 100% positive. It's awesome. I just love to hear the stories, hear the philosophy, hear the craft. Hear about the craft is really cool. So thank you to Pete once again for coming on the show. Next time on the show, who knows? No, for real, I had some in the works, and who knows from there. But just keep up with everything, and when an episode comes, you'll be reminded. I don't ever plug iTunes because I don't know who listens to this where, but the podcast is on iTunes. So subscribe there, and you'll never miss a beat. But you can also like the podcast on Facebook, Butterfly Effect podcast. Then you can subscribe on YouTube because the podcast is posted there too. Butterfly Effect podcast there as well. Twitter, Butterfly Pod, and I'm on Twitter at Ettletod, ETTLETODD. And you can email me at trettleman@gmail.com, trettleman@gmail.com for anything. Sure. Anything you got, except for awful things. I should have specified that. But anyways, hopefully I'll see you again soon. And if not, hey, no problem. Have a good couple of summer months here. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, where it's planes can't fly because it's too hot. So that's what I'll be doing. I'll just be sitting in my dark apartment with the air on sometimes because the power bills are really expensive. And so just picture that for the next, through August, maybe even September. If you are wondering what I'm up to, that's most likely what the case is going to be. All right. Thanks again. Thanks for listening.